Imagine the smell of damp sand mixed with blood and sweat. The deafening roar of 50,000 voices screaming your name. Some for your victory, others for your death. You are in the center of the Colosseum. The metal gate slams shut behind you with a final booming clang that seals your world. Before you stands your opponent. He is not a monster, not some unknown barbarian. He is a man who trained beside you, ate the same bread, and slept under the same roof. Now, he watches you with a terrifying calm. His eyes reflect no hatred, only a cold focus, a mortal calculation. The Roman sun beats down relentlessly on your helmet. Sweat stings your eyes. Your heart hammers against your ribs, a drum that only you can hear amid the crowd's roar. What do? How do you survive the next minute, when every second stretches into an eternity of steel and sand? This is not a Hollywood fantasy. For thousands of men in ancient Rome, this was a brutal reality. But the secret to survival was not what you think. It wasn't just about killing or being killed. It was about cold calculation, economics, science, and a psychological control that began long before you ever set foot on the sand. We are at the height of the Roman Empire, between the 1st and 2nd centuries AD. The games are not mere entertainment. They are a political tool, a way to keep the populace happy and docile, a demonstration of Rome's power. And at the heart of this spectacle are the ludi, the gladiator schools. Do not imagine simple prisons. Think of them as high-performance training centers and a massive investment. Run by a lanista, an entrepreneur who saw men as assets, these places turned the dregs of society into fighting machines. Most were slaves, prisoners of war, or condemned criminals. But some, the octorati, were free men who voluntarily signed a contract, surrendering their bodies and lives for the promise of a fame and fortune they could never otherwise achieve. The first and most important lesson for a new recruit was not how to wield a sword, but to understand his own monetary value. To the lanista, you were not a man. You were expensive capital, an asset that needed to be protected, nurtured, and valued before it could generate a profit in the arena. Imagine arriving at the ludus for the first time. Hear the metallic clank of shackles in the stone hallways, a constant echo reminding you of your new status. Smell the damp straw, the stale sweat, and the body oil that permeate the air. In the distance, the rhythmic, incessant clash of wooden swords and the shouts of the doctores, the specialized trainers, barking endless commands. You are pushed into a small, dark cell. The contrast is brutal. The claustrophobia of your new home against the open, dusty training yard, a place that will soon become your personal hell. The logic behind your survival was purely economic. Fights to the death, contrary to what cinema depicts, were rare and very expensive. The lanista made money by renting out his gladiators for the games. If one of his valuable fighters died, the event's sponsor, the editor, had to pay his full value, an astronomical sum. Therefore, the primary goal of training was not to create killers, but martial artists capable of putting on a lasting show. The goal was to ensure his asset survived to fight another day. Herein lies one of the greatest ironies of your existence. Because you were such a valuable investment, you received cutting-edge medical care, far superior to that of the average Roman citizen. While common people died from simple infections, you had access to the best doctors of the era, massages to soothe your aching muscles, and hot baths to speed your recovery. You were an elite athlete, and your body was a machine that had to be kept in perfect working order. And this was the poison you had to swallow every day. Legally, you were infamous, belonging to the lowest social class, stripped of almost all civil rights. Society despised you, saw you as an outcast. But at the same time, you were a celebrity. Your image might be carved onto lamps and mosaics. Children played with figurines that looked like you, and aristocratic women swooned over you. You lived in a state of constant cognitive dissonance, to be trash in the eyes of the law, yet to have a body treated with more care and expense than most of Rome's free men. Forget the images of chiseled, muscular warriors feasting on huge cuts of meat. A gladiator's diet, his fuel for survival, was surprisingly vegetarian and high in carbohydrates, earning them the derogatory nickname hordearii, the barley eaters. Imagine the meals in the ludus refectory. You eat communally, but in a tense, exhausted silence. Taste the monotonous but filling barley porridge, the thick bean soup, and the coarse texture of whole grain breads. There are no luxuries, no variety. It is simple, heavy fuel, designed not for pleasure, but for function. The contrast is absolute. This, plain, unpretentious food is what prepares you for the most extreme violence, for the act of trying to kill another man while a crowd roars. The science behind this diet was as brutal as it was effective. Modern bone analysis of gladiator cemeteries has revealed unusually high levels of strontium, an element that accumulates in bones through a plant-based diet. This high-carb diet wasn't meant to create an aesthetic physique, but to build a layer of subcutaneous fat. This layer of fat acted as a natural shield. It protected vital organs, muscles, and nerves from superficial cuts. It allowed you to bleed spectacularly for the crowd, adding drama to the fight without suffering fatal damage. You were harder to wound seriously, but the nutritional innovation didn't end there. After a grueling day of training, you were forced to drink a primitive sports drink. Imagine the taste: a repulsive, gritty tonic made from plant or bone ash dissolved in water or vinegar. It sounds disgusting, but this mixture was a potent source of calcium and other essential minerals. It helped strengthen your bones, making them more resistant to fractures, and accelerated your muscle recovery. It was a primitive supplement, yes, but a stunningly early example of sports science applied to human performance. Psychologically, this diet was another tool of control. It reinforced the idea that your body did not belong to you. The lanista owned your muscles, your bones, and even what you put in your stomach. You did not eat what you desired, but what optimized your value as an asset. You had to submit your will, to accept that every bite was part of the economic calculation that defined your existence. The man inside the fighting machine had to resign himself, knowing that even his nutrition was dictated by his price on the blood market. The training of a gladiator was a systematic science, a brutal process designed to maximize combat efficiency and minimize the risk of fatal injuries that could damage the investment. The first weapon a recruit wielded was not of sharpened steel, but of solid wood, and it weighed twice as much as a real sword. Feel the searing pain in your shoulders, arms, and back as you lift that heavy training sword. The Rudies over and over and over again. Hear your own gasping breath, a harsh, desperate sound in the dusty air. Sweat blinds you, dripping salt into your eyes as you relentlessly strike the palace. A 6-foot wooden stake driven into the ground. You strike until your muscles scream, until your hands bleed, until every movement is burned into your muscle memory, becoming a reflex as natural as breathing. The methodology was rigorous. They likely followed a system like the tetrad cycle, a 4-day program that alternated intensity to prevent overtraining and maximize results. A day of preparation and light exercise, followed by a day of maximum intensity training, then a day of rest and recovery, and finally a day of moderate technical practice. Nothing was left to chance. Furthermore, each type of gladiator, whether a retiarius with his net and trident, a murmillo with his large shield, or a thrax with his curved sword, had his own doctor, his specialized trainer. You trained in separate groups, perfecting your unique style and the specific tactics to defeat your potential opponents. And here, in the midst of this world of calculated violence, an astonishing connection emerges. The physicians of the gladiators, like the legendary Galen of Pergamon, were not just there to heal wounds. They used the broken and repaired bodies of gladiators as a living laboratory. Every wound was a lesson in anatomy. Every shattered bone, an opportunity to perfect surgical techniques. Galen, working in a gladiator school, advanced the knowledge of anatomy, physiology, and trauma surgery more than anyone in 1,000 years. The techniques he developed while caring for these fighters formed the basis of Western medicine until well into the Renaissance. Your suffering was, ironically, advancing humanity. The psychological impact of this regimen was immense. You were trained to kill men who were your brothers in arms. You lived with them, ate with them, bled alongside them in training. Bonds of camaraderie were forged in that shared hell, bonds you knew could one day be severed by your own hand in the arena. The training conditioned you to suppress empathy, to channel fear, and transform it into a cold, controlled fury. It taught you to see combat not as savage chaos, but as a deadly performance, a dance of skill and violence that you had to execute to perfection. The arena was not a chaotic slaughterhouse of unrestrained violence. It was a stage with strict rules, attentive referees, and an unwritten script centered entirely on spectacle. The goal was not simply to kill, but to fight well, to demonstrate skill, and above all, to entertain the crowd. Because it was the crowd that ultimately decided your fate. Feel that moment. You enter the arena. The sunlight blinds you at first, reflecting off thousands of bright points on the freshly raked sand. During the Pampa, the opening parade, you wear decorative armor, heavy but impressive, designed to dazzle. And then, you hear the roar. It is not a sound. It is a physical force, a wave of 50,000 voices that hits you and makes the air vibrate. An orchestra begins to play, martial music that not only accompanies the combat, but dictates its rhythm, heightening the tension at key moments and celebrating well-aimed blows. Combat was governed by the leges pugnandi, the rules of the fight. A head referee, the sumarudis, and his assistant, dressed in white to stand out, followed your every move. They could halt the fight if a fighter lost his weapon, if armor broke, or simply to allow a reprieve if the bout dragged on too long. If you were knocked down or disarmed, you had an option. You could surrender by raising the index finger of your each left hand, the gesture known as ad digitum. It was a direct appeal to the sponsor of the games, who, in turn, would look to the will of the public for the answer. And it is here that we must destroy one of the greatest myths. Forget the image of the emperor with his thumbs down. Missio, the act of sparing a defeated gladiator's life, was incredibly common. It made perfect economic sense. A fight that ended without a death meant that both valuable gladiators, in whom the Lanista had invested a fortune, could be patched up and fight again. Fights advertised as sine missione without mercy were the exception, not the rule. They were special events, promoted as a bloody bonus to attract an audience thirsty for guaranteed death. Imagine the psychological pressure. You are not just fighting an opponent trained to kill you. You are performing for 50,000 judges. Your survival depends not only on your strength or your skill with a sword, but on your ability to be a good actor. You must display bravery even when terrified. You must show artistry in your movements, make the fight exciting. And if defeat is inevitable, you must even know how to die with dignity, with a grace that impresses the crowd. The true enemy is not just the man before you. It is the volatile and capricious psychology of thousands of people who have paid to watch you live, or preferably die in an entertaining fashion. And then, the moment comes. A false move, a failed block, an instant of exhaustion. You fall. The sand, once a firm surface, is now cold and rough against your back. Your weapon lies several feet away, unreachable. You are defeated, disarmed, completely at your opponent's mercy. Your vision blurs, a mix of salty sweat and the blood dripping from a wound on your forehead. The deafening roar of the crowd becomes a dull, distant hum, as if you are underwater. You taste the metallic tang of fear and blood in your mouth. And then, a shadow falls over you. Your victor stands, towering, his heavy, ragged breathing, the only clear sound in your shrunken world. You feel the cold, sharp point of his blade press against your throat. This is the moment of final reckoning, but he does not kill you. Not yet. The script of the arena demands one last act. He raises his head, not to you, but to the box of the editor, the sponsor of the games who is paid for this spectacle. And the editor, in turn, directs his gaze to the only force that truly matters in this moment, the crowd. With what little strength you have left, you raise a finger on your left hand. It is the gesture of surrender, a silent plea. You are not asking for mercy, you are asking for judgment. Now, 50,000 people become your jury. Their verdict is not based on justice, but on the quality of your performance. Did you fight bravely? Did you give them a good show? Was your defeat dignified or cowardly? The roar comes back into focus. You hear the shouts, you see the white handkerchiefs waving in the air, a signal asking for your life to be spared. You hear the boos and see the thumbs, whose exact gesture is lost to history, but whose meaning is unmistakably deadly. All this torrent of information is processed in seconds by the editor. In that suspended instant, terror and a strange hope mingle in your chest. Your heart beats with a force that threatens to break your ribs. You are not simply waiting for death, you are awaiting a critique of your final performance. Your entire life, Your training, your suffering, has all been reduced to this: your value as a product of entertainment. It is the ultimate fusion of athlete, actor, and slave, a moment when the thin line between life and death is drawn not by the gods, nor by the emperor, but by the whim of the public. The Roman gladiator was not just a bloodthirsty barbarian, as cinema has led us to believe. He was an elite athlete, a product meticulously engineered by a brutal economic system, and a pawn in the grand political theater of Rome. He was a man trapped in a paradox, despised for his status but adored for his spectacle. His legacy resides not only in the silent ruins of the Colosseum, it resides in our modern fascination with combat athletes, in the sports science that began with physicians like Galen studying their bodies. It resides in the uncomfortable truth that human entertainment has often been built on the foundation of others' suffering. These men were symbols of two sides of the same Roman coin. One hand, they represented the discipline, endurance, and courage, the virtues that Rome so admired. On the other, they were the walking testament to its cruelty, its capacity to turn human life into a bloody spectacle for the masses. They lived and died by the rules of the arena, by the roar of the crowd. Their true secret to survival was not just the strength of their arm, but their value as an investment and their skill at performing on the world's deadliest stage. The next time you watch a combat sport, think of the gladiator. Think of the pressure, the calculation, the man behind the weapon. What has really changed? Are we still the crowd, screaming for a performance? Or have we learned something from the silence that fell over the sand as it was raked for the next fight? Leave your opinion in the comments.